All right. Hello, English 11. Hope you had a great weekend. If you're watching this video, that means that you want to know why you got wrong what you got wrong. And so I'm hoping that this video will help you out. Remember that you are watching this hopefully Monday night. And so if you are not watching on Monday night, just know that the assignment needs to be redone and turned back in by Thursday, and that will put it exempt on your in the grade book, so that you won't see it, so you won't get whatever grade you got on it. So let's go over these. So you should have out your worksheet that looks a lot like this. And so let's just go over the questions really quickly, and we'll just start with one, and we'll just keep going until the end. So the first question here is to reread the first two paragraphs, and then what is the tone of the two paragraphs? A lot of you, the problem that you had was that you did not distinguish between tone and mood. Mood is how a piece makes you feel, so it uses words that make you feel like sad or angry or something like that. Whereas the tone is the author's attitude towards a subject. And so, as we read these first two paragraphs, I will show you kind of where a lot of people got confused and a lot of people seemingly took the easy way out of it. So let's go back and look. So here's paragraph one. Let me zoom in a little bit for you. All right. So paragraph one is, I spent my Saturday nights in New York because those gleaming, dazzling parties of his were with me so vividly that I could still hear the music and the laughter, faint and insensate, from his garden and the cars going up and down his drive. A lot of people just stopped pretty much right here and said, oh, gleaming, dazzling parties. When, yes, he is calling them gleaming and dazzling, but as you keep going, he could still hear the music and the laughter faint and incessant. That is one of the words that is key here. That was one of your vocab words, and it means a repeated sound that's really annoying. And so he's calling the parties dazzling, but he's kind of calling the people who were at these parties really annoying. And so if we keep going with that mind frame about the people in this party or the people themselves, let's keep going and let's find some other words that'll help us decide whether or not he does or does not like these people, and then that'll kind of be his attitude and Fitzgerald's attitude, our author, towards this subject. So the laughter faint and incessant from his garden, and the cars going up and down his drive. One night I did hear a material car there, and saw his light stop at his front steps. So the words material car here, I think, are very important as well, because you know, a lot of people don't like the fact that, people just buy things to buy them. They have materials just to own them. And so I think the fact that he calls the car a material car here, meaning that it's not needed, it's more than what you need. And so I think that this is another word that kind of helps us with this tone. Um, but I didn't investigate. Probably it was some final guest who had been away at the ends of the earth and didn't know that the party was over. And I think this is kind of a very negative tone to set with the party was over. And so I think so far we have a lot of these negative connotations with some of these words that Fitzgerald is using. And I also said that it's paragraphs one and two. And so let's go down to paragraph two. On the last night was my trunk packed and my car sold to the grocer. I went over and looked at that huge, incoherent failure of a house once more. Right here, he calls the house a huge, incoherent failure. And I think that's very key to what he thinks about all these material goods, because once again, yeah, the house is huge, but it's still incoherent. It doesn't make sense. It's unnecessary. And it's difficult to understand, as the word incoherent means. And so I think that he uses the word incoherent and he uses the word failure to describe this house, which will go into number 4 as well later on. And so we'll come back to that one here in a little bit. There was an obscene word. That also gives us a tone. Um, and then by some boy with a piece of brick stood out clearly in the moonlight, and I erased it, drying my shoe raspingly along the stone. Then I wandered down to the beach and sprawled out on the sand. And so I think since we're going to be using all of these words, I think for number 1, we can claim that the tone of these first 2 paragraphs is a negative tone about material objects, because he's talking about the people, talking about the cars, talking about the house and what's going on inside the house, all things that people are either buying or doing. And so it's a very negative tone. And so let's go down to question number 2, which is you're going to contrast the first 2 paragraphs with the tone set in the 3rd paragraph. And so a problem that a lot of people had with this one was that you were not looking for the tone of the subject and of the paragraph. And so let's go back up and let's read it and let's look for what the paragraph is mostly about. Okay? So, most of the big shore places were closed now, and there were hardly any lights except the shadowy, moving glow of a ferry boat across the sound. And as the moon rose higher, the inessential houses began to melt away until gradually I became aware of the old island here that flowered once for Dutch sailors' eyes, a fresh green breast of the new world. Okay, right here. This is where a lot of people got confused. What was right here. And so, as we saw in paragraph 2, he was on the beach and he was sprawled out in the sand. And he was just looking around. And so it says that the inessential houses began to melt away until gradually I became aware of the old island. So it's not literally or physically happening, it's happening in his mind. He's picturing what this island used to look like for Dutch sailors' eyes. So it was these Dutch sailors who were coming to the New World. I mean, so we're talking about in the past. We're talking about, the late 1600s, probably early 1700s. And so that is what we're talking about. We're talking about this new world, this old island of the past. And so its vanished trees, the trees that had made way for Gatsby's house, had once pandered and whispered to the last and greatest of all human dreams. For a transitory, enchanted moment, man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent, compelled into an aesthetic contemplation he neither understood nor desired, face to face for the last time in history with something commensurate to his capacity for wonder. All right, this was kind of confusing, so let's go back and let's reread it, okay? So this part, we know that he's picturing this old world. And then it says, its vanished trees, the trees that had made way for Gatsby's house. Meaning that in order for Gatsby to build this, or not maybe Gatsby, but for whoever built the house, they had to tear down these trees. And so he's picturing these trees up again once more. They had once pandered in whispers to the last and greatest of all human dreams. That sounds really nice. I mean, pandered means to kind of to beg or to kind of get you on their side. Last and greatest of all human dreams. I think that's a key phrase here, so I'm going to highlight it. For a transitory enchanted moment, enchanted is usually a positive tone kind of a word. Man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent, compelled into an aesthetic contemplation. And if we go back to our vocabulary, aesthetic means appreciation of beauty. He neither understood nor desired. So that means that this Dutch sailor, when he saw this new world, he must have just been so overjoyed and must have like held his breath because he was just thinking about how beautiful and how wonderful this new land looked. And maybe it wasn't the fact that it was beautiful aesthetically, but what it could encompass. Back up here, it says the greatest of all human dreams. So it was this new land that anything could be built on. His capacity for wonder is also another one here. So if we're going to look at all the words and all the phrases that we have highlighted here, I became aware of the old island, which is what we're talking about, that had flowered. Flowered is a very kind of positive word. Fresh green breast of the new world, that's also some positive words here. The lasting greatest of all human dreams, and enchanted, aesthetic contemplation, capacity for wonder. All of these set a very positive tone for this past, for what was before Gatsby and all of these material goods that we saw up here. So to answer number 2 and number 3, if we go down here, so number 2, the tone of the paragraph is a very positive tone because of all those words that we just highlighted and that we described. And so here, how's the subject matter between the two different? The first 2 paragraphs were about the material goods that were on this island that Gatsby and our narrator lived on, the house, the cars, the parties, all that kind of lifestyle, and that's kind of in the present. And then you compare that to what was there, that past, and that past of wonder and just a fresh start, a new beginning. And so that's how the paragraphs are different. And what this tells us about our narrator's view of the American dream, it's a very negative tone for material goods. And so a lot of us, when we think of the American dream, we think of a nice house, a nice car, a family, good job, money, stuff like that. And so our narrator kind of disagrees with that. Our narrator thinks that maybe it's something in the past, that wonder of starting anew and having that new, fresh world at your fingertips, having the ability to have your own freedom and stuff like that. And so I think if we keep reading these paragraphs, that will also become apparent um, with the past. And so, but before we do that, let's go on to number 4. What's the narrator's attitude towards Gatsby's house, and what are some words or actions the narrator says or does that makes you believe this? If we go back up here, a lot of people said, oh, he really likes Gatsby's house because it's a fresh green breast of the new world and stuff like that. But if you read it once again, that is what our narrator is thinking inside of his head, is picturing inside of his head. So let's look at actual things about the house. If we go back up to paragraph 2, it says a huge incoherent failure of a house. There was obscene words in it. Yes, he did erase them, but overall, huge incoherent failure of a house. And then going down to paragraph 3 as well, the inessential houses. And so inessential means not needed. And so all of these houses, he is saying, are not needed, they don't make sense, and they're failures. And so he thinks of the houses as they're bad. That's how he pictures them, and that's how he describes them. And so that's his attitude. He doesn't like them. Now we're going to get on to the next parts of these paragraphs. We'll start with number 5 here. What does the green light, as seen in paragraphs 4 and 5, symbolize to Gatsby? Remember that a symbol is an object that represents an idea or something that you can't really physically touch or feel. And so let's go back and let's reread these, okay? And as I sat there brooding on the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to its blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in the vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning. Alright, so let's look at these two examples of the green light and what they could symbolize. Alright, so up here it tells us exactly where the green light is at. The green light is at the end of Daisy's dock. And so he had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. So he saw Daisy's green light at the end of her dock from where he was, where his house was. And then down here, he believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. And so when we're talking about this green light, we're talking about all of Gatsby's hopes and desires that are kind of summed up into the character Daisy and this green light, because they're kind of one and the same, because it's at the end of her dock. And so a lot of people did not get that. And so if you're reading closely, which you need to be doing, you will see that that green light kind of represents all of Gatsby's hopes and dreams and his American dream. And so, when the narrator says that the light has eluded us in paragraph 5, what does that mean? Well, the word elude means, we can't capture it, we can't, carry or hold it. And so, he's saying that this dream, of this future of everything being perfect like Gatsby wants it, it's eluded us. We can't have it. But then he says, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther in one fine morning. So, even though we haven't been able to capture our dream, we will still keep trying to do it. Which leads us into number 6. Number 6 is, what does it mean that we are boats against a current? What are we trying to do, and does our narrator think it is possible? Why or why not? And so let's look here. So we be on boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. So we are the boats, and that we are going against a current. But then it says borne, which means carried back ceaselessly into the past. So are we able to achieve our dream? I think here that our narrator, is saying no. I think we're going against a current and we're being carried backwards into the past. And so I think what that is saying, and you could argue with me, I guess, but I think it's saying that our past is always going to come back to get us. We can't escape what has happened. We can't we can't become this new person with this new dream that it's pretty hopeless and futile. And so a lot of that is going to be the arguments that we will be talking about when we read The Great Gatsby, which this is from. And so I would say no. And you could argue with me, but unless you had like a lot of proof and a lot of your own explanation, it's probably why you did not get the points there. Okay. And then number 7, what do you think the American dream was during this time period for most people? What examples help you come to this conclusion? A lot of what we talked about here in the present, not the past, was the material car, the big house, the parties, all that kind of stuff. And so I think if you had an answer somewhere around that, getting the girl or guy or whoever, the parties, the house, the car, all like the material things. I think if you had an answer close to that, you got the points for it. But if you didn't, then you didn't. So, all right. I really hope that you guys learned a lot from this. Remember that you turn it back in on Thursday. If you have any questions over what this was, or if you have any questions about any of the things that I hopefully explained well, email me, let me know. Thank you, and have fun.